This is a soul for your
I just got this thing on here. It's Mikey Tuala. It's obviously you, Samoan. He's currently working as a KAYAD, is that it? Yes. Community Action on Youth and Drugs Advisor with Auckland Council Community Impact Unit. Your primary focus is to help transform the systems and environments that perpetrate alcohol, drug harm to support rangatahi using strengths-based and harm reduction approach. That sounds pretty intensive, mate. What?
Yeah, I mean, basically it's how do we support young people in the environments that they live in by reducing some of those harms that, we often see, in our environments. Sort of things like the proliferation of liquor stores in a community. How can we reduce that? How can we reduce alcohol advertising? Because we know that particularly for our Māori and our Pacifica kids, they're 5-6 times more exposed to alcohol advertising when they're walking to schools. And this was a research project that was done. And, these sorts of things, even though it may not seem quite, explicit, these can lead to, long-term harms for our young people, early drinking, and just kind of getting young people into antisocial behavior and all that. So basically my role as a KAYAD advisor is to support communities to reduce those harms so that our young people can thrive, and be the best people that they can be in their communities. So.
Another clip I saw was a lady talking about is there going to be no more alcohol stores near schools out south? Or
so my team was part of an initiative where we were looking to reduce some of the hours of opening bottle stores off licenses. So we know that in New Zealand, alcohol harm is a big issue, and some of the things that we can do at that policy level is to, close down shops at earlier hours so that people aren't going to the liquor store after 9 p.m. And that's where we see the issues get much more worse for our communities. So. By closing down those hours, limiting bottle stores within certain communities. This has all been part of trying to introduce a local alcohol policy in Auckland. So, myself, my team, we have people like Councillor Josephine Bartley, who, was on the video clip. These champions, in our community who are fighting for, alcohol harm to be addressed because, we see a lot of that harm, playing out in our communities.
Is it hard to turn that ship around? Because it's a ship that's been going in one direction for quite a while, right? With having alcohol stores open all hours of the night, having them near schools and educational, places and stuff like that.
It's, and I think that's one thing that I've learned being in public health, working in this space, is that we're in it for the long haul. This isn't just a one night sort of fix where all the problems will be gone by tomorrow. This is something that takes time. I think we're slowly starting to see a gradual change in terms of New Zealand society and their attitudes and behaviors towards alcohol. But we're still on a long journey ahead.
A lot of our Pacific people like a drop or two. And even in my family, we've had, heavy drinkers in our family that, I don't know if it's a gene. Has there been any research into what makes alcohol so addictive in our Pacific communities? Is there any research done on that? Or
there's been a lot of research done in that space. And, I guess also to note that, alcohol had come over, post-colonization. And so before colonization occurred, there wasn't anything such as alcohol. So it was something that was kind of introduced into our societies. And so now you're really starting to see a lot of the ripple effects of alcohol harm, from, say, our, generations, grandparents, right through to young people these days. But yeah, obviously for Māori and for Pacific, we rate high on the harm scale of alcohol, whether it's through things like domestic violence, crime, suicide, all these sorts of things that alcohol is a contributing factor to, and so it is really disheartening to see a lot of the research and the facts that are coming out of how much alcohol is really impacting on our communities.
I guess that would also be reflected in the amount of Pacific people and Māori people in our prison system, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I think about our systems, our justice system, our health system, our education system, they're all like interconnected, and if our people aren't doing well, aren't being healthy, that's going to have an impact on all those other different sectors. And I was working when I left university. I actually was working in a youth rehabilitation center, so where young people were coming in, young as 12, 13, coming in to look at their addiction of drugs and alcohol. And it was a real eye opener for me to see these young people as young as 12, 13 coming in and seeking support. And I guess a lot of these young people were just coming out of youth justice, youth prisons, and it was just really really sad to see a lot of our Māori and PI in those spaces.
Were they stuck in a cycle, do you think, with their families and people that they hung out with and associated with, that this is what they were doing, so they may not have seen the future that bright, so thought, well, I'll jump on this bandwagon too.
Yeah, I think it's really tough, especially when your environment is saturated, with alcohol and influence of, intergenerational trauma, gang violence, a whole heap of stuff. And so, people can often feel like, they are stuck in this cycle, like a poverty cycle, and it's really, really hard to get out, really challenging.
Yeah.
And I often saw that with a lot of young people that were coming through the rehab program, was that a lot of them felt like that was sort of their destiny, was to grow up, join the local gang, or and that was kind of their sense of community or their sense of family. So
I think like the blessing for you is obviously you've got a stable family. You're still with your siblings, your mum and dad are still healthy, and obviously brought you guys up well. That's not always the case in a lot of families. Where it doesn't matter what colour you are, just families in general. I find that a lot of people resort to alcohol as a way to find some happiness. Their life can sometimes be so miserable that anytime they find any happiness is when they hit the bottle. They don't understand that the consequences the next day, or the consequences of when they're actually in that height of drunkenness can be quite catastrophic. But that feeling of just forgetting about the bills that you have to pay, the miserable job that you're in, the issues you're having with your partner, or the issues you're having with your family. It's like a quick fix. It's something that fixes them up just for a couple of minutes, just to give them a bit of peace, right? And they don't know how else to handle that sort of stress and everyday misery, right?
And I think we saw a spike during COVID times. And when, people had to stay home, were locked down, we definitely saw an increase in, purchasing of alcohol and, just the normalization of it. And so, obviously, we're now sort of, I guess, trying to work at that sort of population health level. So, working through policy and trying to sort of make sure that, those policies that are getting like introduced into government and that are set up to best support people who may be going through something, who want to seek help, but just maybe feel a bit helpless. They don't know who to connect to, etc., etc. So, yeah, I guess that's something that we're really, really pushing, advocating.
That was a strange time. It was shuttle the gyms and the local fruit places, but leave the bottle stores out.
It was real surprising,
pardon me?
Alcohol was actually what was it called? Like a non-essential? Oh, essential.
Essential, yeah.
So like you could literally just order online and then it'll be delivered in front of your door in the next sort of couple of hours. So to think that alcohol was an essential part of your groceries as well. It was just like, oh wow, it's interesting.
Do you know what this stuff does to some people?
Yeah.
So, but glad that's all in the past for now. Anyway, so what's the initiative you're doing with our friends Alex and Pete?
Yeah, I mean, just mad respect for the usos there. They're doing some real awesome mahi out there in the community, and basically a group of us sort of came together to really try and understand how we can best support those who are working with our young people, and in particular our Pasifika youth workers, because they're often a forgotten, piece of the puzzle. People don't often, think about the youth worker who's, doing intensive one-to-one with the young person, and even just the profession of youth work isn't recognized here in New Zealand.
Really?
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Oh, I mean, it's been a debate, but when we look at, say, someone who studied social work, there's like a professional registration to become a social worker.
Really?
So even like, say, for nurses, you have like you have to register to become a nurse, and that's obviously through study. But for youth workers, there isn't anything that kind of sets a bar for them to become, like an official youth worker. Like there's no kind of registration. So, a lot of our youth workers are doing it for heart, out there serving in the churches, serving in the youth groups, and, just serving. And so, youth work is kind of almost like the nice to have, it's very nice that, they got youth workers in the schools and stuff. So, it's really challenging, to have youth work as a career.
So it's a job that's kind of not recognized as it should be, as an important part of our community. It's not seen
absolutely not seen as, I guess, valued. When you think about, say, like the pay scales, I know a lot of my friends who, we started out as youth workers and we're just on like the bare minimum wage. And the work we're doing is supporting some of our most vulnerable young people, with complex mental health and addictions. So it's a real
it's an uphill battle, right?
Yeah, it's an uphill battle. And so part of the conversations that we've been having is how can we professionalize youth work? How can we make sure that we are really supporting our Pacific youth workers, those who are working in mainstream organizations? How can we maintain and keep our Pacificness? Because often that can sometimes be lost when we are working in mainstream, Balangi kind of spaces. So it's about providing a space for our Pacific youth workers / youth practitioners to come together, to connect, to learn about what's happening in the space, because often the knowledge, the wisdom, it doesn't get passed down to our more new youth workers that are coming through. So it's about how we can honor, all those youth workers who've been doing youth work for 20, 30, 40 years. How can we share all their knowledge, their practice, to our, younger generation of youth workers coming through, and just provide a space to celebrate our culture and, just sort of be authentically Pacific.
I didn't realize that. I mean, I always know or hear that the cops, the police, the nurses and the doctors are always under a lot of pressure and should be paid more, and
Mm.
because they are really pillars of our community, right? But
Absolutely.
a lot of things they deal with is the now.
Yep.
It's the results of not having good youth workers
Yep.
in the past that have pulled these people aside and said, "Hey, look, there's another pathway here.
Yeah.
Maybe you should consider doing this one instead of that one."
Yeah, yeah. And often the youth worker is the go-to person, when we have like family group conferences, when we bring the young person in and you have all the different agencies that are coming to support, often the youth worker's voice is like the forgotten voice, or it's not sort of acknowledged, but yet they're the ones who are working most closely with the young person.
Yeah.
So it's about how we can give them honor as a youth worker. Just give them the recognition and the acknowledgement that the work that they're doing is just as important as, the psychiatrist or the social worker or the police officer.
Well, there's that saying that you don't be the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's exactly what's happening at the moment. The ambulance and the police are at the bottom of the cliff, waiting for these people to jump off that could well be helped or saved, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the beauty of youth work, is how can we be at the top of the cliff and how can we prevent our young people from, falling down or so. And so I think that was one thing that really captivated my interest when I was thinking about what I wanted as a career. I always knew it was something to do with serving young people, serving our community. And so, when I sort of got into youth work, I knew that this was something that I was really passionate about, and something that felt purposeful to me. And so that whole idea of trying to prevent young people to, get to a stage where it's just either too late or where police are now intervening, I felt like that's kind of where I can make most of my impact. And so, a group of us, as I mentioned before, this is our vision, this is our dream, is to provide spaces for those youth workers who are just working, so tirelessly, to support our young people. We heard from our sector that everyone's burnt out. Our youth workers are just tired, and so it's about how we can create platforms that our youth workers can feel empowered to do the mahi that they're doing.
That's not good to hear, to be honest. It's a sad indictment on our community that that people, because the stuff that they're dealing with as well is not it's not easy stuff, right? There's a lot of trauma and horrific stories and horrific places where these kids are coming from, and I can only imagine there's some, it must be hard for some of them to go to sleep at night because of the stories that they've been told, or the things that they've seen. Much like the ambulance and the police and firemen for that matter. Yeah,
absolutely. And I'm guilty of being one of those people where I would take some of my work home with me, especially when I was working in the rehab program with young people, and just some of the stories that I'd hear. It had a huge impact on me mentally, and I had to learn how to, try and leave work at work, and when I go home, to be present with my family. So, it's a huge reality for a lot of our youth workers, and it's hard to, put a stake in the ground to sort of differentiate, work and home, because
your brain doesn't know really the difference because it's always working.
When you're doing it for the heart, it's real hard to sort of say, no, I just keep that at work. And and we've seen a whole lot of cuts through our youth sectors, a lot of our community organizations, youth organizations that have been doing such amazing work, and now, they're having to now condense something that's already strained, but now they're having to really cut some of their youth programs that are doing some amazing stuff for our young people. So, it's a huge shame to see that happening. One thing also that we're trying to advocate for is the wraparound support for our youth workers. So having professional supervision. So for example, if a youth worker has gone through some kind of traumatic event with a young person, how do we ensure that that youth worker is given the right wraparound support so that they're not just feeling traumatized? And so part of our Bau Pacifica initiative is to look at building more better wraparound support for our youth workers so that when they're encountering these very difficult situations, they have some support out there for them.
They need it as much as the people they're trying to look after, don't
Yep,
they?
absolutely. And I always think about that imagery of the cup being half full. I don't know if you've heard that one before. And that's you can't give yourself when your cup is empty. So it's about how you can look after yourself first before filling other people's cups.
Yeah. It's like the old adage on the aeroplane, right? You put your seatbelt on first.
Yep.
And then whoever you're with, put them on next. So,
Yep.
And I think that's important that you go into those situations as a healthy person that's able to give, because it's a lot you have to give. And when you can't give any more, to kind of step aside, and hopefully someone will step in until you're strong enough to come back. Right?
Absolutely. And we all have our own challenges, our own traumas, our own experiences. So it's about how do we keep ourselves safe? How do we wear that like that korowai of protection? Something that is really important as practitioners or as youth workers, serving our communities. And so we held a series of whono across Auckland earlier this year. And one of the priorities that came out from our youth workers was how do we uphold the mental health and well-being of our youth workers. And so recently we ran an event where the purpose of it was to celebrate our Pacifica, but also look at our well-being. I just feel real blessed to be in those sorts of spaces where our people are, people like Peter Leilua, Tilly, Killian, Sanerivi, like these youth workers who have just been serving our communities for many years. We all got the heart to serve our community. And so it's about how we can work together to, create more bigger impact for our youth workers. So Bau Pacifica is real dear to my heart, starting out for me as a youth worker and now working in public health. I really see that there is a gap there in terms of supporting our Pacifica youth workers.
Yeah, Pete's been doing it for a wee while now, and he's an amazing man. I had him on the podcast as well because he's a local hero here, right? He looks after the Wesley, Mount Roskill, Mount Albert kind of areas, and he's doing amazing stuff down there at the Wesley Community Centre. So my daughter, Letiara, I'm not sure if you've met her, but she had a lot of involvement with Pete and the youth that he was looking after, and she loved the experience, So it was a blessing and an honour to have him on here and have a chat to him as well, get a bit of an insight into what it takes to do that sort of thing, because it's one thing to talk about it, but it's another thing to actually take action and actually do something about it.
For me, like I made like a conscious decision to be in the organization that I work in, to get insight into that system itself, because for the organization that I work for, there's a lot of influence and a lot of power when it comes to local community and local decisions that are made. And so for me, I really want to try and understand, what are some of those barriers that are prohibiting us from making meaningful change in our communities, because sometimes it is the system that is causing the harm to our people. So part of Bau Pacifica is looking at the system, and it's looking at how we can create culture change, shifting sort of mindsets, and really looking at how youth work can be upheld.
Is there a place in the world that you can base what works on, or is it something that you guys are creating? I mean, the systems is the system, right? It has some positives there,
Absolutely.
but there are some places within the system that need some tweaking and just to make it a little bit better for everybody involved, right? Including the people that you're looking after, including the people that look after those people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing that we're really, really conscious about is how we bring in our indigenous practice into these spaces that are often mainstream, often corporate, pahalangi. So it's about how do we indigenize spaces so that it looks like our people. And so I think part of this Bowl Pacifica is looking at creating environments where our people feel seen and where our people feel heard, whether that's at government level, whether that's in local church, local board, any kind of level. How do we ensure that our voices, our people are in those spaces? So within council, I sit in the community impact unit of council, and our direct manager who oversees the whole unit, is Pacific. And like for me, just like that's real inspirational, is to see our people, in
those positions,
to
make decisions, right?
And like just the mana and like the honor of those people, like it's just real, like wow, like it's real aspirational. And I think it's important that we continue to grow that, and have role models out there, that we can look to and be like, hey, if he can do it, I can do that too. So
no better role model than you, brother. You're a handsome, fit-looking fella.
Oh,
you can bring your skills and your communication and what you know to the table. It's going to be a tough journey, but I think you can do it.
Yeah, and just making sure that I guess your values come through as well, and that you don't, because you might be walking into like a corporate unfamiliar space, that you don't leave your Pacificness behind. That you bring your full self, and that's something that I've been on my journey with, is learning about how I can bring my full kind of authentic self into these spaces, because it's really important, it's needed, and our communities will benefit from that.
I think it's important to have your moral compass always pointing in the right direction, right?
Absolutely.
It would be very easy to lose that compass, especially when people are throwing money at you and the big corporations are saying, hey, we want you to do this. Even though it might not be beneficial to the people that you're trying to look after, but if it feeds your back pocket. But with what your mum and dad have obviously taught you over the years and the things that you know and have learnt, it'll be interesting to watch your journey also.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I've just recently graduated from a Pacific leadership program.
I saw that,
called the Growing Pacifica New Leaders Program.
Nice.
So it was a program over 10 months, and basically it was facilitated by Professor Selina Tusitala Marsh, who's a poet.
I know Selina.
Oh, yeah. So Selina, she's awesome, She's hard case. Avondale, I think she's Avondale proud. So just to have like people like Selina as like a mentor for me, like, she took me on this journey of trying to discover like who I am as a Pacific in the workspaces that I work in. And we all had to choose a metaphor that would describe our leadership, and I chose the Fale Samoa as my metaphor. And basically over the 10 months, we had to write a poem.
Yes. That gets published, right?
Yes. So it will be getting published soon. But basically about how the Fale Samoa is connected to my leadership program or my leadership development. So I guess for me, one of the things that I talk about is being grounded in who you are and allowing to be nurtured as well. So I think for me, trying to understand that it is really important to, be grounded, be sure of who you are, but also be open to receiving the knowledge being nurtured by amazing people like Selena and Jeremy Leslie, who were our facilitators, and just kind of being open to the call, of all these like amazing people who have so much wealth of experience and knowledge and passion, to be open to receiving that, and then giving what you can back out to the world.
For sure. I did a similar sort of course. It was with Beatrice Famawina. It was called the Best Leadership Pacific course.
Oh wow!
I did it with Ronnie actually. He
wow.
was part of that cohort, and there were lessons in that I'll always carry with me now. I mean, I don't need to use the skills I learnt there in the particular job I have now.
Yeah.
But at the time, I was working for a company where I was looking after people, and some of them were Pacific people.
Okay.
So it was always good to come back after being filled with Pacific knowledge and joy the next day and have a word to these people and say, hey, this is what I learnt last night, and tell them the learnings, and hopefully they took something on board. So well done on that. I'm glad that Selena's still doing that stuff, because she's an amazing teacher. She's
awesome.
A wonderful lady with her beautiful hair, right?
Yeah.
Awesome, very awesome. What's next on the books for you, Mike?
So I don't really have any kind of formal plans for next year, but I do want to try and develop in the projects that I'm working in. So currently, Bo Pacifica. I'm also doing a bit of mahi in the sport and alcohol space.
Oh, okay. What's that? What
so that's kind of working with organizations across Auckland who work in public health and sports. And what we're trying to do is understand the relationship of alcohol within sport. So how can we reduce some of that alcohol harm when it comes to sport across all levels. So whether that's at club level, whether that's at provincial level, really trying to shine a light on some of those stories when we look at the intersection of sport and alcohol, because we know in New Zealand it's just so interconnected.
Yeah.
So
it has been for a long time too.
It has been, and that's probably one of the most difficult things. Hey, is how do we sort of start to unpack something that's just so embedded into New Zealand culture right from, like sort of that All Blacks level through like sponsorships and all that, right to our community grassroots. So one of my projects that I'm leading is around how we can enable conversations between public health and the sporting sector, so that the conversations are happening, and that we are trying to denormalize some of the alcohol culture and practice within our communities.
Just looking at this little spiel that you have online here, navigating two worlds, the identity and supporting young Pacific in Aotearoa. I follow the trail of the Pacific migration of the 60s and the 70s, when my grandparents made the courageous decision to leave Samoa for better opportunities in Aotearoa. My 5 siblings and I were raised in West Auckland. Our home in West Auckland is shaped by the journey they made. That's so true, back in those days it was a huge risk, for Pacific people to come out to New Zealand for better opportunities, and they all came on the Matua, I think, which went to Wellington, and then back in the 60s, and then they started filtering through the country, whether it was down to Invercargill or mainly up here in Auckland. So that they are quite inspirational.
Yeah, I think it took a huge leap of faith, Like if you think about, having to start your life again, move into a foreign land where, English was the first language. So just kind of having to start from scratch, and trying to set up yourself, trying to set up, for your kids as well. So like I just could imagine just how hard it was, for my grandparents to come through and try and create a life here in New Zealand. So that's often one thing that I always think about when when we're going through the tough times, and it's like, if my grandparents could do it, we can definitely try and pave a way forward from there.
One thing I think us Pacific people in general forget is, back in the old days, the navigation skills that our Pacific ancestors had, the bravery that they had, whether you believe they came out of Hawaii or Savaii. That there's some different versions of where the Pacific people originated from. But they jumped on a boat and they head out to the horizon on the ocean, not knowing what was out there.
Yeah.
And they just sailed away until they found some land and then started all over again. That's an amazing story. I mean, the Balangis give Christopher Columbus, they have a holiday for him. They James Cook. Some stories I hear about James Cook, he wasn't the hero that they make out to be. But our Pacific people, back in the old days, they were leaving those guys in the dust in regards to the bravery and the wisdom to get from one place to another across the biggest bit of ocean in the whole world. It's crazy.
Yeah, to think, our people navigated the Pacific Ocean, the vast ocean, and obviously technology wasn't so advanced, so to be able to sight through the stars and the wind and the sea and the currents, like everything, I just think about how switched on, how intelligent, how smart our people were, and to be able to preserve that. And I think that's something that I've been real interested in, is like, how do we sort of carry a lot of some of that into our everyday kind of work. I was inspired, someone said something around the use of AI, but he wasn't talking about AI that we kind of hear. He was talking about ancestral intelligence. So how do we continue to build in our ancestral intelligence through sort of the everyday work that we do? So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I really like just that navigation story and the story of voyage into where we are now. I think there's a lot that we can learn from, and there's a lot that we can take from our ancestors.
I think there needs to be a little bit more maybe a re-education of who we are as people, because I think we've kind of forgotten, especially the new generation of Pacific people have forgotten about what our ancestors actually did. Before, like you mentioned, colonialism, before white men came and had the influence over our people. We were surviving thousands of years on an island, living. The other thing is, you look back on the diets that our Pacific people had, right?
And I think there are initiatives that are slowly sort of popping around, to look at how, I think something called Kai sovereignty. How do we sort of sustain ourselves through the use of like the land and sort of growing our own kind of food in that? And I mean, my brother, he works at the Heart Foundation as a Pacific Heartbeat facilitator. Basically, most of his job is around educating our Pacific around nutrition and healthy sort of eating habits. And a lot of it really is habits, that our people have developed, and it's hard when the environment is just saturated with fast food restaurants and fish and chips and just all these things that aren't good for the diet. So to try and sort of step back and realize that these things are harming our bodies, whether it's fast food, whether it's alcohol, and to sort of figure out, okay, what can we do as a solution to try and go to healthy alternatives, or like you said, go back to sort of some of the olden day practices that sustained our people. So
another big ship that you have to turn around there, because
absolutely
convenience is not convenience is not always the healthier option.
Well, now you can just click a button on your phone and you'll have food in the next 20 minutes or so. So convenience is becoming such a thing now. So definitely a challenge.
It's a big boat. All right, also, look, man, thank you so much for coming in, bro. It's really nice to meet you in person, for one, and awesome to hear your story, bro. I know you thought you weren't worthy of coming in, bro, but man, you're more than worthy. I really appreciate what you're trying to do out there for the youth, for the Pacific and Māori youth, for New Zealand youth, really. And I hope your journey is a good one, and you achieve the goals that you've set up for yourself. And you're doing it for your family, mum and dad, grandma and granddad, and our Pacific ancestors that used to travel the oceans, but as a generation of Pacific people, we've kind of forgotten. So, this your journey is much like theirs because it's a big one.
Yep.
There's a lot of challenges, there's a lot of unknowns. You're heading off on that the waka, into the ocean there, and you don't know what's around the corner over the bend. But if you go off their journey, they got somewhere, right?
Yep.
They got to all these different islands, and they made a difference. And I believe you can do that too also. So thank you so much, bro. It's been a real pleasure for me to sit here and listen to your journey also.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for the opportunity. And I think one thing that I've learned is how do we take from the past sort of all that learning to the present and sort of continue on that legacy. And to do so, I guess, with everyone as part of the waka. So, to use that analogy, everyone has a role to play, on the waka. One might be the one who navigates using the stars and that. The other one is pulling the rope and that. So everyone has a role to play. And so it's about identifying people like with the strengths, with the passion, and just bringing them together to create change. And I think that's kind of what's happening, I guess, with our Pō Pasifika is that there is a group of us that are real passionate to do that. And so it is for the betterment of our people, and it's acknowledging our ancestors, our grandparents, those who have come through, but it's also looking at our young people and where we, really, really want them to be. So I guess that's kind of, what I sort of want to leave at this part is just that what is the legacy kind of moving forward, and how can we continue to nurture, the future of our generations. So
God bless you. That's awesome. I wish you all the best.
thank you.
We'll have to catch up again and see where your journey's taking you in 6 months or a year's time, and we'll go from there. Thank you very much, also.
Sharuso.
As I always sign off, all love, no hate. Whālai ia.